In my defense, I recently reread the history of the US Securities and Exchange Commission, and restructuring was actually seen as a form of securities regulation. And so this came under the SEC's purview in the 1930s. Politics intervened, and that part of the SEC's work was taken away from them subsequently. Today, however, we are seeing the same thing happening in practice in Singapore, as so much restructuring actually involves M&A or mergers and acquisition work, as well as the need for business acumen, as opposed to just knowledge of details of the Insolvency, Restructuring and Dissolution Act, or we call it IRDA, the Companies Act, and even private law. These things are important, but I think underlying all that is actually a deep knowledge of business. Judges and practitioners in this climate have to work very closely together in a very involved setting.
R&I regimes cannot remain static. They must evolve to stay relevant. The fact that the US Bankruptcy Code has been amended 70 or more times since its introduction more than 40 years ago bears testament to this. In a complex world with multifarious challenges, R&I regimes must be nimble, flexible, and bold, and embrace innovation. I hope that the conversation this afternoon will help build consensus on the shape that our R&I regime should take. We must recognize that the risks of business failure, indeed business failure itself, are inherent aspects of the entrepreneurial journey. Creditors assume risks by extending credit and may be left facing a non-performing liability if businesses fail. An effective R&I regime must therefore strike the right balance between the debtor and the creditor. It must provide entrepreneurs with the space and the tools to restructure their businesses if viable, and to efficiently wind up if not. At the same time, the regime must ensure adequate protection for the interests of creditors. In my view, there's a need to move away from the perception that business failures are necessarily tied to wrongdoing or poor management. These risks may materialize for a host of reasons, many of which may be beyond the entrepreneur's control. An effective R&I regime should thus distance itself from any stigma associated with business failure. Balancing protection and potential, risk and reward is at the heart of this ongoing challenge. We must decide, based on prevailing global challenges, existing commercial realities and societal needs, where in the spectrum between a creditor-driven and debtor-focused model Singapore should be.
But broadly, people kind of know what the rules are. And when you know what the rules are, it gives you more of an ability to not need to go to court, because broadly, the company, the bondholders, the senior secured creditor kind of know what will happen if you go to court. That enables you to cut a deal out of court without ever going to court because of the comfort with the legal system. And I think that's a huge benefit. And it's a sort of unseen and maybe even unprovable point, but I think it helps the efficiency of the system. The things that go on in court do get huge amounts of attention in the US. And one unappreciated fact is we did put in, just before COVID, what we call Subchapter 5. And pre-COVID, basically since 1978, we had a one-size-fits-all Chapter 11 system. If you were the little corner grocery store or you were Lehman Brothers, it was the exact same bankruptcy system.
What we've seen in Singapore also is the rise of the pre-packs as well, right? I think companies are going in when they're stressed, not when they're distressed. The advisors have learned that just heading to court first with what we call a free-fall bankruptcy is something we should try and avoid.
You have those who specialize in debt and are comfortable with riskier situations. They then are far more likely to extend debt in possession financing, risky financing basically. And then that enables you to achieve more turnarounds. Hopefully that kind of completes the circle of tying together debt market turnarounds debtor-driven versus creditor-driven kind of thinking.
So one successful example, maybe Manoj can share more, would be Pacific International Lines. This was the 5th largest carrier in the world and the largest in Southeast Asia, done under 4 months, and I think 1 month was caught vacation, so it could have done a lot faster. And I think it's a classic example of the type of restructuring that we're hoping to see in terms of value to the economy as well, because after the scheme was completed, due to the uptick in shipping and the freight rates, the company survived, and not only survived but flourished, and it returned a large sum to charity as well. So I think that was just a very nice example of how when everything comes together we can see positive synergies.